Ben Mulwa, a governance consultant, in just helping us to understand what transpired this week and making sense. Are we learning any lessons from these conferences? Thank you so much, Ben, for making time for us here.
It's my pleasure.
The Week in Focus.
Thank you.
I almost said Counties in Focus because I've hosted you on Counties in Focus.
Absolutely, yeah.
But this is the Week in Focus, and we're looking at what has happened this week. The biggest topic, the devolution conference, 7th annual devolution conference, happened this week in Makueni County. What's your take on that? Let's start with that.
Foremost, you realize that particular conference was slated to happen in Makueni last year. Okay. That was the year 2020. But it was completely impossible because of the COVID-19 challenges. And it's a good thing that a lot of things and a lot of sectors have opened up to the extent that such a magnitude of persons could be hosted in a county like that for a couple of days to particularly discuss climate change. Again, to me, one of the major things that I like about what happened last week is, or particularly this week, is before devolution, it was nearly completely impossible to imagine a national event of that magnitude being held in a remote place like Watertown. I happen to come from Makueni County. So when I look at Watertown 10 years ago, say in the year 2011, and you look at Watertown today, today you need a tour guide to be able to navigate around the town. And this can be attributed to devolution. Since the office of the governor was established in 2013. There has been a massive ripple effect in the larger economy. We have seen investors coming in to invest in the town. We have seen institutions like even big universities like the University of Nairobi and others seeking to set up campuses in an area that I don't think would have been a consideration 10 years ago. We have seen 3 to almost 5-star hotels coming up in that area. You can imagine the population of people that was accommodated coming from all the 47 counties, and nobody was sleeping in their cars, and nobody was sleeping in the bushes or in tents. So that tells you there has been a lot of transformation. And that's why I still keep believing that devolution was really the cornerstone of the 2010 constitution, because this is the only thing that really Mwananchi from every corner of this country can physically see. Last week I was listening to another discussion where somebody from Mandera County was proud that since 2013 they have seen with their own eyes the first tarmac road in some of those counties. So on the general perspective, I think this was a mega milestone. But I don't know whether you want us to talk about the specific subject on climate change.
No, we are getting to that. So what I'm getting from you is that it is working.
Oh yes,
it is working.
Oh yes.
So because of some of the things that you mentioned, actually the results from having tarmac roads in some areas, that you wouldn't have seen that if we were not having a devolved government.
Absolutely.
Now let's focus. Let's look at the subject matter. What was the theme of this devolution conference? Is it the right time to start discussing climate change?
There can never be a wrong time to discuss climate change, because climate change is real. As I indicated to you again, I happen to come from the same Makueni County that hosted the devolution conference. And you'd be surprised. Ordinarily or normally, since I was a kid, the short rains of this month of October and November and probably December usually begin by latest mid-October. And it happened that it is only until yesterday that the rains began.
We saw that.
That tells you that the impact of climate change is ultimately or finally here with us, and we cannot run away from that. Why am I saying that? It was interesting, actually. For the first time, I think the governors chose to focus primarily on climate change, and the counties are on the front line in terms of addressing or trying to mitigate the vagaries of climate change in several ways. This again coming immediately after COP26, which happened in Scotland, just at the beginning of this month, late last month and the beginning of this month, tells you that the global conversation now has to get serious. What I find a bit unfortunate is the fact that there has been too much talking. When you remember at the launch or at the advent of the Millennium Development Goals, we were hoping that all these things that were being discussed last week and all these things that are being discussed in Scotland earlier this month were well articulated 20 years ago. And the objectives, the global objectives, were to have all these issues addressed by the year 2015. We are 6 years down the line after that particular deadline, and unfortunately, there really isn't much that can be shown. Of course, there has been a lot of progress in terms of trying to cut down carbon emissions into the atmosphere, but that is largely skewed because there is still the component of change or transition on energy sources and energy uses. Africa primarily heavily depends on fossil fuels. Unlike the Western world, where they have really transitioned, we have a huge percentage of electric cars that are being produced. We have a huge percentage of the utilization of solar. We have aggression towards the establishment or the recreation of forest cover. So on the Western part, there's been quite some bit of a progress. When you come locally, I'll still go back to the local example of Makueni County. When Professor Kibwana came into office in 2013, he embarked on a massive reforestation program that unfortunately failed after a year or two. What we got back as feedback as Wananchi was there were corruption scandals and tenderpreneurs hijacked the project, as is the culture in this country. And the Noble Initiative really never saw the light of day, because if that had been sustained, I would have imagined that Professor Kibwana would have been showcasing to the rest of his 46 colleagues what he's been able to achieve, particularly on reforestation. Well, now we cascade that lower or go further into the issue of reforestation and the impact. There has been massive destruction of vegetation cover in the larger Ukambani area, and particularly in Makueni. Then you find that little streams that were flowing almost through the year when we were growing up don't have water anymore. In fact, even after the long rains, within a week or two, they dry up, because there has been two issues: the issue of deforestation and the issue of sand harvesting. Sand harvesting again has a massive impact in the lowering of the water table. So initially, streams that would generate water from the little hills and mountains and brooks that are around the area have lost because the water table has really gone down. So the impact is massive. When we see the drought, because again you saw many counties where a lot of livestock has been lost from Kajiado and the larger north.
About 23 countries actually being facing droughts.
These are the realities of climate change. And unfortunately, we are spending too much time speaking too much English without anything really tangible on the ground. Because I listened through most of the presentations at the conference, and I did not hear very practical and simple ways to be able to really mitigate climate change. I heard people giving out fancy examples about Australia and Europe, and but there is so much. For example, when you talk about the destruction of water catchment systems and even water conservation systems, the Athi River flows through the larger part of Makueni or Ukambani actually. That's why from all the way from here in Athi River town, you know, Athi River town is in Machakos County. A large percentage of the population of Machakos and Makueni counties depend on that river. But there has been a lot of effluent being disseminated into that river that has made the water useless, especially to livestock and for agricultural purposes. And eventually, if you use the same water for farming or for irrigation purposes, you end up with contaminated food. So the impact is really massive. That's all I can say, Brian. But the fact that all the 47 governors, including representatives from the national government, could consolidate to discuss this is an indication that, because there are many issues that the governors could have agreed on, but out of all the issues that were available for discussion, including 2022 and the role that county governors and governments are going to play for purposes of stability and ensuring that this country remains united. If by the fact that they chose climate change and environment, it shows that they can also feel what it means to live through the impact of climate change, and they are willing to not only dedicate themselves but also allocate resources towards the mitigation of the vagaries of climate change.
Fair enough. Because I'm running out of time and I'd like us to continue this discussion.
I know.
But time is not on my side, and I'd just like to touch on this one. When it comes to implementation of whatever has been discussed in the 7th Devolution Conference, because the governors now say they need a little bit of time, like 2 years, to now be able to implement whatever is being discussed in the recommendations that they're going to be given. Then are we seeing a point where, because you say you were listening to what they were saying, but you couldn't see anything practical and tangible that you can actually say, this is what they said, it can actually be implemented. Are we looking at probably when they come and have a sitting next time, are we looking at some of these things that have been recommended to actually get implemented?
As I indicated, unfortunately, as a country, we have this chronic addiction to talking. And we talk a lot, actually. We talk about everything as a country, but the capacity or the capabilities or the commitment even to implement what we talk about is usually near zero. And I wouldn't be surprised. I don't want to pour cold water on the commitments that governors made, but we need to distinguish on the fact that there is a difference between the governors and the governments they run. So if they are genuine and they are serious about implementing the resolutions or the commitments that were made during that conversation, what they need to do is, we still have a half a financial year before the end of this particular financial year. They can make readjustments very quickly in their budgets and start implementing immediately what they need to do, and set the systems in place so that in the event, like most of these governors are serving their second term, like I gave you the example of Makueni, Professor Kibwana. So it should not be tied to the governor, the person. It should be tied to the county government. So if Professor Kibwana is committed to the issues that were deliberated, he just needs to put in place the systems now, not next year, now, because the opportunity is there, as I've told you, and county governments work with the supplementary budgets. So if there's anything that needs to be done, they can do it now. Then by the next financial year, again, 2022, 2023, make sure that there are sufficient allocations towards the mitigation of the effects of climate change. And then the administrations that will assume after them will be in a place to just continue with what is running.
All right. Ben, I'm so out of time, and
but there's something very quickly that I would want to mention, especially about that. I think, especially granted that there is a possibility this is the last devolution conference that will be held under the tenure of President Uhuru Kenyatta. I find it was a bit unfortunate for him to miss out to go have a conversation with these governors. And then the most tragic bit was also the deputy president choosing deliberately now to snap the event, and he's seeking to run for office, especially as president. I think that interaction would have been very important also to show his commitment, because climate change has impacted every corner of this country, whether it is from Uasin Gishu, where the deputy president comes from, whether it is here in Gatundu, where the president comes from, whether it is in Bondo, where Raila comes from, or whether it is in Sekuru, where Kalonzo comes from, or whether it is in Mululu, it cuts across. So that failure of commitment or demonstration of goodwill from the president and the deputy was a black stain in a very important conversation for this country.
The president will be argued that he was out of the country at that particular time.
Yes. He sent a representative representative, but as I've indicated, it would have really been nice if you'd have made arrangements before, because this is an event that had been planned before.
Okay.
But the deputy president deliberately chose to snub it, which I think was very unfortunate.
I'm out of time, but I have to ask this one. On that one of the deputy president actually missing the devolution because he was expected to be closing the conference. What does that speak of him in terms of just being as somebody who is eyeing to be the next president?
I found that unfortunate, as I indicate, and especially somebody who wishes to ascend to power as president. Somebody would begin to wonder whether he's somebody who's genuinely committed to the concept of devolution in this country. As he populates his bottom-up economic model, devolution is already doing that in very many ways by ensuring that the things, like I indicated, the things that would have never happened in water in 2011 are happening today. It was really, there are times, especially for leaders, where you must set aside small political issues or political concerns and really do what you are expected, especially as an office holder, because he holds the office of the Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya.
And it is one of the biggest.
Besides being Ruto, who wants to be president, and there are no two occupants to that office. So that would have been, that was a miscalculation in my assessment on the part of the Deputy President.
Right, and
it doesn't augur well to demonstrate his commitment to implement the 2010 Constitution and especially safeguard or protect devolution and the gains that have been made so far.
And also something that probably would have been discussed in that conference when it comes to climate change.
You know, that would have been an amazing forum for him really now to demonstrate, if he assumes power as president next year, what is his commitment to devolution? Because as I said from the onset, I think devolution is really the biggest thing about the 2010 Constitution. So if that is not very important to you, then I don't know what else would be very important to you. Yes.
What else would be very important to you? Thank you so much, Ben. I wish we could have continued this discussion, but because of time, we actually have to end it there.
No worries.
And I hope next time when we have such a discussion, we can actually call you and continue discussing matters devolution and just governance in this particular country that we actually love. Thank you so much for making time for us.